getting gravity to the end point, because that was the idea. The power is in my hand. The power comes from the floor. That shouldn't break. At what point does it break? At what point do I do something extra which shouldn't be there? That was kind of the entire focus of my practice for a long time.
So, hi, I'd like to introduce Ed Hines. And Ed's in Paris. We're here in London. This is sort of our lockdown era, 2020, the year of the lung. But I met Ed, my God, I think it must be about 20 years ago, maybe even, was it about 20 years, something like that. In Crete, I was teaching out at a place called Yoga Plus. And I think, were you studying out there or were you teaching out there?
I was teaching Tai Chi out there.
Teaching Tai Chi, that's right. And I think there was something that happened in the classes, you know, there was a kind of a meeting of minds or an understanding in the qualities of the work, because, you know, the yoga, a lot of people that sort of know my work, is not necessarily a yoga as such. And I've come from a Qigong background as well. And there's elements of that in the practice. And it was really interesting to me, Ed, just to throw this in quickly, so I met someone whose mother had influenced Vanda Scaravelli, and she was a Tai Chi teacher, and she was the missing link. He'd go to Vanda's house and teach her when Vanda was with Iyengar and stuff like that, and it all fell into place.
So would that have been in Switzerland?
In Switzerland, yeah. Okay. So and it was like, oh, okay, now that's just really nailed it, you know. And so anyway, when I met Ed, just it was something about Ed's movement as well that just blew me away, and just immediate understanding of the practice, where, you know, I've been teaching this work for a long time, and we found a lot of people struggled kind of getting some of the notions of it, but Ed's background and his work just started to shine through. And yeah, it's we didn't stop talking after that, really. We started to explore some of the work that you do as well, and I got more interested in Bagua, because that's one of the elements that you spent a long time working with and practicing and teaching. So Ed, welcome. Tell me a bit about how you got to where you got to. You know, what kind of got you into this quality of movement? Because you've done quite a few martial arts, I think. And what's attracted you to this nature of the martial art that had it be so fluid for you?
Well, I'm just going to say that in the 20 years since we've met, and also in the time before, there were various explorations which were more fruitful and less fruitful, and more interesting and more in this direction and less in this direction than others. Essentially, I think it was some of my teachers in Taiwan who were fairly clear about the idea of using the ground to provide strength and relaxing. And the nature of the practice in Tai Chi, and the nature of maybe me being a bit obsessive at the time, was I would spend a lot of time just doing very simple movements with this idea of how could I feel the ground in my hand, and how could I feel the ground supporting the top of my head, and how could I have as little tension in my body as possible. And I think that's the fact that in that Tai Chi kind of context, there is the idea of just doing the same thing for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, which you probably get less in yoga, which is a big advantage from it. And you could do it in yoga and so on, but most people, they'll hold a posture for a minute or 2 minutes, which can be actually quite a lot. Some of the postures which I hold from a Tai Chi perspective, 2 minutes, 3 minutes is plenty. But it's that repeated, how can I do it with less idea? And I think that partly came from explanations of Taoism that I've read too. Okay. The idea of the uncarved block, doing less. And then later on, I found that kind of matched with some of the things Todd Christ was talking about with respect to inhibition, and the sense of being able to move too. So one of the limits within a more typical yoga frame, as I see it, is it's more about opening into a posture and less about moving between postures. And yes, you have the people who are doing the vinyasa. At the same time, the difference was I had a very clear mental image of what I wanted to do to move between postures, which was coordinate everything from my center of gravity in a quite concrete way.
Yeah. And
if I lost that, and if I lost the sense of in moving my body, getting gravity to the endpoint, because that was the idea. The power is in my hand, the power comes from the floor, that shouldn't break. At what point does it break? At what point do I do something extra which shouldn't be there? That was kind of the entire focus of my practice for a long time.
And that was something that was really, it stands out to me, and it still does, and I can still hear it in my mind, is when we were working and practicing that time just outside from where the studio was on that gravel area.
Mm-hmm.
And there was just a moment where I had to stop and watch you because I was following you with the movements, and all I could hear was the sound of the gravel. Mm-hmm. And as the gravel was moving, the motion and the sound of the gravel was in perfect timing with when your hand reached its end point, the sound stopped.
Mm-hmm.
When you came back, everything was moving, and when your hand reached the end of its end point, coming back to you, the sound stopped again. So it was just the gravel told me everything that I needed to know. It was quite remarkable. And
I think it's that multi-sensory approach is I think more and more interesting to me.
Yeah.
In this way, the fact that we're getting feedback from all these different elements, and that we have the idea of 5 separate senses, but that's just a kind of mental illusion.
Yes. Yeah, it's there's so much more to it, I think. And I mean, this is the thing I find, especially with a couple of colleagues of mine, Rupert Johnson, who you'll meet at some point, probably online, and Steve Bracken, they're martial artists, but also have a very deep sensitivity in their practices too. And Rupert quite heavily steeped in his Qigong practices, is that, you know, when I practice with them, and maybe we work with a little bit of the martial aspect as well, in the end, I keep on getting bonked on the nose by them or something like that, because I get too, well, it's not distracted, because I think this is really important stuff to understand the dynamics of these qualities of the movement. So in the end, I'm really interested in feeling what these movements are creating through the body. And I forget in the moment, there's this person that I'm working with, and he's still got this agenda that I'm still working with them. And if I'm not in the right place, I'm going to get a smack in the face. And it's not hard, they just give me a slap. But you know, and they always laugh at me. I mean, Rupert kind of gets it a little bit more sometimes, is that there's this sensitivity that we're working off, and he'll go down that route with me. So it's more about, you know, the point of contact that we have with each other, but how does that point of contact translate to the ground? Mm-hmm. I'm just so happen to be the conduit between the two. Mm-hmm. So yeah, go on. Sorry.
I'd say no. I think it's one of the difficult parts of martial arts with respect to this movement is going down different pathways, which with respect to essentially getting that bonk on someone else's face and avoiding it for yourself.
Yeah.
So that's a whole discipline, a whole study, or a whole series of studies, and the part is you can make it the whole thing, or you can make it a support for it.
Yeah. There's a friend that I practiced some Tai Chi with a few years ago in Brighton as well. And his teacher, she's written a lovely Qigong book, very simple kind of coffee table Qigong book, but it's a tiny one, but it's actually really quite useful. Mm-hmm. And he's got an interesting way of moving, but he was saying that, and he always said this with a big smile on his face. He said, my teacher would always say that everything starts together and everything ends together. Mm-hmm. You know, and it's rare to see that happen in some individuals in practice, you know, and I don't see that really happening very much in yoga, because yoga has sometimes gone completely in a different route. And I think somewhere there's a culmination of all of those practices that have the same essence behind them. If we remember that, There's never any need to stretch when that happens. There's a body that is just elastic, and it opens and then recoils, and opens and then recoils.
Mm-hmm.
I see that in you a lot. You know, I've still that memory in me. So, where did you start? What started you off on this whole track, Ed? From the very beginning? Tell me, what got you started on all of this?
Okay, so I haven't told this story for a while, so it's interesting to really think about it. If I go right to the very, very, very beginning, I guess as a small kid, I'm talking kind of 3 years old, 4 years old to older, I kind of liked the idea of fighting. And my parents' friends would say, "Hey, little boy, what's your hobby?" And I go, "Fighting," and then smack him in the knee. And, it wasn't that I was getting into lots and lots and lots of fights all the time, but somehow there was something important to me about it. Then when I was 13, 14 years old, I did kind of bits of martial arts. I also boxed when I was younger. And boxing I liked it. At the same time, there was it was difficult. It was hard. I had various amateur matches kind of before the age of 10 or 11, and I think I had 4, and I lost 3, but I won 1. Anyway, so about the age of 12, 13, I started getting into Dungeons and Dragons. I always liked science fiction and fantasy. And then also about the age of 14, the BBC put out The Way of the Warrior, which was a documentary series talking about different martial arts, each week a different martial art. And me and my friends would watch them in the evening and then go to school and talk about them and go, "Wow, did you see that? And how he did that? Wasn't it cool?" Wow. The one which appealed to me most was the one set in Taiwan with the teacher Hong Yiqiang about internal martial arts. And what appealed was, kind of felt like Dungeons and Dragons. The way it was described, which was to some extent, it wasn't really entirely accurate. The way it was described had this sense of magical power. And I was like, wow, yeah, I want some of that. This is the martial art I'm going to do. So I found a teacher in London. And now that teacher was also a strange person, because in this world, there are a lot of strange people. He was a little bit guru-ish. He was quite philosophical. He strung things out. There wasn't a lot of choice at the time. On the side to him, which was good, was it was a lot about relaxation and sensitivity. As a martial art, not all that useful. As a kind of I suppose differentiated, integrated, detailed entry into body work, also not very useful either. So like, just relax, feel your chi, just relax, feel your chi. There wasn't enough on the where should you put your mind, what should you pay attention to. It was just kind of vague and philosophical. But within that vague philosophical idea, it was the idea of softness, and always softness, and always softness. And that was something which stuck with me. And then I went to Taiwan because, well, within that sense of softness, so as a 15-year-old adolescent who didn't always find life easy, there was this amazing sense of peace. Wow. I went, I would go to my Tai Chi class, I would do my practice, and afterwards it was just like, and I hadn't had that from anywhere else. And there was the idea that I could change my state through what I do with my body. And but that I could, by some sort of action of any kind, change my state. That was revolutionary. I had education, I had school stuff, but it was just learning a bunch of external facts, whereas this was changing my perception of the whole world or certainly my perception of myself, through breathing and moving. And I thought, oh, wow, why haven't I been taught this? What else is there to learn? So when I finished university and didn't have much chance of finding any useful, interesting job in environmental biology, I headed off to Taiwan and carried on there.
That's amazing. And that's been your journey ever since then?
Yes, on and off. I've kind of say branched off in different directions and areas, and there's within the doing kind of nice, soft, gentle movement. It's lovely. There's always been a part of me which has wanted to be more explosive and adventurous and physical, and possibly also a vanity side of it, which was like, yes, and I want to have a pretty body. So I've also explored kind of different sorts of weight training and yeah, gymnastic-y things.
And I think, when we're involved in physicality that way, I mean, it's all of those things come with it, don't they? Really, I mean, I found this, from my background in bodybuilding and stuff like that. Well, why not? I'd have people that come to me, when this then became my profession in teaching. They felt embarrassed to say, well, but I actually also want my body to look good. I said, well, there's nothing wrong with that. Why is that a problem? Isn't that too vain and stuff like that? No, it's not. If you're, it's not that you're just piling it on. It's just only surface. This is depth to the depth of your bones and part of your soul. It's an expression of you. So it feels good to move in it that way.
Yeah.
Why not? It kind of comes with the process anyway. You start moving a body in certain directions, it's going to condition itself quite well.
Yeah, it's nicely put. And I think one of the things which has been very interesting to me recently is putting this all into the evolutionary perspective, which to some extent you were the first person to do that for me when you were describing the double-bagged anatomy of the human body.
Yeah.
And the embryological process of going from single cell to two cells to the folding and refolding and so on, and the ontogeny following phylogeny.
Yes, yeah.
Yes, that's the right order. Yeah. So, but I have friends who are very, very deep into that from exploration of different animals, and that's kind of, to me, that's one of the things which connects movement with communication, with relationship with nature, with relationship with other species. And say I've studied environmental biology for a reason, because there was something about it which I cared about, and finding this way to link it up is also fascinating and important.
Oh, that's exciting. That can kind of go around full circle then, can't it? Those two things can come together. I mean, I find it even just interesting in animal forms. That it was Rupert actually that really brought something to my attention with in some of the martial arts we work with. There's various animal forms or movements of hands that will have certain, like lion and cheetah and mantids and stuff like that. And we just sat down at one point and he said, listen, you're not trying to make the shape of that. That's not, you're trying to embody its behavior. And I just stepped back and I thought, oh my God, there's absolutely, if I look at how it behaves as a movement, then there's a very different expression as to how it comes out, rather than I'm trying to make it look like something.
Yes.
It's the same. Then I just thought, then it just, the whole thing, like it's like a compressed file on a computer. All of a sudden, it all opened up in my head, and I just saw a lot of the postures in the yoga world and realized lots of people are putting on shapes rather than embodying an attitude. If you watch what a dog does, they don't do what a human does in dog pose. But if you actually look at the way a dog does that movement, it's something that they kind of experiment for a while and actually draw back away from. And then they open into it in a different way. And the same thing with a cobra. A cobra never backbends. It expands upwards. So all of a sudden there's a very different language. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. And the people who are listening to this may not know, but I have 5 snakes in the house and 21 snake eggs incubating. So yeah, snakes are close to my heart when you talk about this cobra aspect. Yeah, I've not particularly thought about it in relationship to yoga. I've thought about it much more in relationship to martial arts. And to an extent, so the people who I work with in respect to this, they also think about it in terms of locomotion, which again, this is because of the more static nature of yoga, it's less evident, whereas they're going, all right, well, the original fish movement became the original amphibian movement with the arms out here, and then they came underneath us, and the spine began to have this wave as well as a lateral wave. Then that gets adapted into the contralateral swing of human walking.
Yeah.
And all of this, but it's very much a movement as opposed to a shape.
Yes, exactly. And it never stops, you know, the same with the creatures, that you never see them put on a posture. I think the only ones that do is a pointer dog or something like that, you know, bing, they'll do that thing where they're pointing their nose, whole body goes stiff and it stays there for a moment. But other than that, it's only, I think, when animals are kind of stalking, and like my dog, sometimes she used to stalk squirrels for a while, and she will look like a pointer dog, and then she'll stop for a moment and stay really steady. But you can see that the whole body's got slight oscillation in it as they're waiting for the next movement. They'd always look round at me though, just to say, is this okay that I'm doing this? Because there's a squirrel and I'm going to go for it. But I'd always scroll the heads up before the dog got it, at least. But also, because you, from what I remember, you dive, or you've done some you've done the monofin diving. And I remember being up on the rocks in Crete and watching you, because there was something about your movement anyway on land that just mimicked this kind of watery quality. And then when I saw you in the water with a monofin, it's just that beautiful kind of motion that moves through the body. And it was something that was just coming from head to fin and from fin to head. And I just thought, okay, yeah, this really makes sense as to most of those movements that I see with you. And is that just something that you've just always done, or you've always been interested in?
Yes, I think that's also, I learned to swim quite young, and I had a swimming teacher. My parents had a place in the south of France, and there was a hotel with a swimming teacher, and he used to kind of put on a show with his young students where he would throw them into the water and then hold something out for them, which they would try and grab. But he was quite into, if you want to swim, you have to be, it's not just a question of technique or stroke, it's also a question of not being afraid of immersion. So I don't remember this, my sister tells us about, he used to have us put our face in a bowl of water and breathe and put our face back in. The thing I do remember though was he used to hold us on the bottom of the swimming pool with his foot. And he said, when you want to come up, wriggle. And then he used to wait a little bit longer just to kind of show that we weren't dying and so on. But I just love being underwater.
Oh, okay.
And it was an escape for me from kind of the confusing social outside world. I was like, yes, now I can fly. And I would be in swimming pools and looking at the sunlight rippling on the sides. And it was just magical. And that stayed with me. And then I got into scuba diving. And then one time on a scuba trip, I was having met people in Crete who told me about the discipline of freediving. I thought, I'm not gonna, I was in a scuba trip. There was a wreck which was about 12 meters down, so it wasn't too deep for me. I was like, oh, rather than scuba, I'm going to freedive this. And I had this whole week of scuba diving before, or several days, and I was like, actually, I just prefer the freediving. So yeah, that's something which has always been there. And I guess it touches on something which is ancestral in that it uses the mammalian diving reflex.
Yeah.
And going back to being suspended completely in water, plus that idea of relaxation. It's very clear that if you want to hold your breath for longer, you need less tension in your body.
Yes.
And it's similar to Tai Chi in that way.
Amazing. And with the Bagua, is that something that kind of came around in your time when you were when you were away?
Yeah, it was when I was in Taiwan.
Yeah.
So going back to what got me into Tai Chi was this documentary, The Way of the Warrior, on internal martial arts. So it focused on largely Tai Chi, but it also touched on Xing Yi Quan and Bagua. And there was a young person who youngish, I guess he was in his 20s at the time, who demonstrated Bagua on the program. And it was strange and mysterious, and I'd never seen it before, and I was kind of fascinated. But I went to Taiwan to do Tai Chi because that was where my teacher had been, and China at the time was much more closed. So yes, go to Taiwan. And while I was there, I met someone who found I was there for Tai Chi. He said, "You interested in Bagua?" I was like, "Yeah, but I don't really know much about it." He said, "Well, I've got this teacher." So I went to his place and I met the teacher and I saw him teach a couple of classes, and I was like, yeah, I want to do this, because he had just an amazing quality of movement to him. It was that bouncy, springy, capable of changing direction at any moment with extreme smoothness. And then he was also, as a teacher, very comparatively clear with respect to the use of martial and the body training too.
Yeah.
So that was how I started doing Bagua. I kind of just fell in love with it because of the movement.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's got a beautiful quality to it, and it's just watching that the spiralic dynamic within it is something like no other system really that I've seen. And yeah, sort of working with you with that in that particular time, I haven't really explored it to a lot of depth. You know, there's been elements of it, but I've been, you know, my Wing Chun practices and the sort of long forms I've been working with my colleague Rupert has been the primary thing. But it's almost as if it's like with you got to immerse every part of your soul into all of these practices to kind of tie them together, and got to keep with it all of the time. But your primary teaching is Bagua, isn't it? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And how long have you been teaching now then?
Well, I've been on and off is the thing. So I came back from Taiwan 26 years ago. Nearly 26 years ago. And I started teaching not long after I came back. But then there were, say, a few breaks and a few put more emphasis, put less emphasis. At the moment, I don't have, well, it's COVID time, but I don't have regular or much in the way of the regular class in Paris. And that was kind of a lifestyle schedule mistake choice. On the other hand, I'm becoming more available teaching online in different ways, like many people. Yeah. And I was moving that way already before.
Yeah, because it seems from what I've seen with some of the stuff that you've put out through your YouTube channels that you break some of the elements down quite into simple elements of the form as well. It's just what I see with you, it's so crisp and so clear. You know, you can see, I can see the movement through your body from ground to fingertips and stuff like that, you know, so it's made very clean, which is really quite, it makes it accessible and beautiful in terms of its fluidity. And so what is it that why would you want to, what's your philosophy of the movement behind it, you know, for you? What does it mean to you?
Bagua.
Yeah.
I think there's something which is mysterious about it and intriguing. The pleasure and the quality of movement when I'm doing it in a way that I like is just draws me back to. It has layers and layers of specification from my teacher, one of the ways he described Bagua is as a flexible framework which manifests change. So what I like about Bagua is that it is flexible and you can put a lot of different things into it or onto it. It doesn't have to be just one thing.
Yeah.
And maybe from a more kind of mythical perspective, it's circles and spirals and these archetypic shapes which are found everywhere in life in mythology and so on. So
Because it seems, yeah, I mean, there's so much in terms of an energy efficiency about it. You know, you're not wasting any time, wasting any effort with accessory movements. It's all kind of contained within itself. There's a lot of discipline, I think, in understanding that, but it seems like the patterns of the movements kind of mimic the shapes of the structure that exists under the skin, if that makes sense. You know, so we've got a whole network of patterns and spirals that exist in the body. And what we're doing is kind of going with those. And I think, and what I see again is that when it's all linked in, it's from your inner body to your outer shell, you're responding equally. It's all working as one. You know, it's not, you know, there's an interesting term to say everything works as one, but this is working as one by the whole structure working in terms of all of its varied rotations that exist from bone right the way through every tissue layer towards the skin. And I don't know, again, I just see this in you and your quality is that there's such a consideration in practicing that way that your mind has to be so immersed in it that your mind becomes the tissue, if you see what I mean, if that makes sense. You become everything. And that's how I see you, you know, that's how I see even the way you speak, you know, your language, your tone, your movement, your body. That's the thing that makes the person I know as Ed. Yeah, so the movement pattern, I would just, even if I saw a silhouette of you moving and there's a bunch of people, it's straight away, there's Ed's movement pattern. It's, there's a signature in the body, and that's one wholeness that comes together. And it's I think that's rare. And this is, I think, you know, when we've met, that rarity is the thing that kind of comes through. You know, you can have someone that's out there professing to be this particular teacher and does these fantastic movements, but you know, when there's something very different, you can smell it. You know what I mean? It's all there in sense and feeling. So, you know, what would be the benefit for people to do that with you? That's a big question, isn't it?
I'm less good at expressing this.
I could ask you this every day, Ed, and there probably will come up with different responses each time. I know how this feels, but right now, today, what do you think would be of use to someone exploring that kind of practice?
On one level, it's about ease of movement. If you like, it's ease of movement, a connecting and being aware of more possibility of movement in the body. That's one side. I think also a little bit in terms of people who are interested in martial arts from a kind of more fighting perspective, and it's not necessarily an easy entry point, but there's an understanding of how your body works which can be reversed. So you understand how your body twists and moves, and therefore you understand how the other person's body twists and moves. You understand where you can go, so that helps you escape. You understand where the other person can't go, which helps you catch them if you want to. And that's a mixture of something which arises spontaneously, and also you have to investigate like any other martial art, by making mistakes and having clashes and not working the way you want. But not having a contradiction between these two, having this bridge of movement, which is easy movement, which then becomes possibly horrible movement if you think about the eventual consequences martially, but helping to put you at ease with your body, yourself, and your relationship with people. That's where it's interesting.
Yeah. No, I can see that, and you know, you use the word negotiation. I think that's really great, and investigate. You know, that's great. Well, thank you for that. That's brilliant. I mean, that's a great understanding. We're going to have to probably wrap up now. But so how can people find you if anyone's interested in working with you, or maybe, I don't know whether you'll be doing anything online with some people if they were beginners at something, but I know there's a lot of people in Paris as well.
Yeah.
But how do they find you?
Two places. I have a website, i-bargois.com, and for French people, i-bargois.com. I also have a Patreon, which is 21C Bar Bar, 21st Century Bar Bar. It was an idea I had a couple of years ago, which is to offer bar bar in a way which doesn't have the same cultural baggage and complexity which is built up over the generations and cuts back to the original essence of bar bar.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
21C bar bar.
I'll look for that too myself. So I'll put the details up on this as well. But Ed, thank you very much. And
thank you, Gary.
We'll be interviewing you again soon on some specific subjects again.
Yeah, I'll be happy to.